half mortal, half god, all heroes of Olympus. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast where we rank every book in the Percy Jackson Mythological Universe. Today we're brought to you by the Monster Donut mobile app. Use offer code Riordan to save 10% off your first order. Now let's get into it. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara, and today we're discussing the Heroes of Olympus Book 4, The House of Hades.
So we're going to do things slightly differently today. Some people might have been following on Twitter at Doing Okay Video. I've talked about how I have some tough personal stuff going on right now, but I figured having a little bit of a distraction actually might be good for me right now. But we didn't get time to make an outline or recap and stuff like that. So what we're going to do this week instead is we're going to talk about our general thoughts and then go right into the rankings. And I'd like to know what people think about this idea in general.
Just want to add, please rate or review us on various podcast services. A big thank you to The Ranger on Apple Podcast and someone on Audible. We couldn't actually see.
Yeah, the person was anonymous, I think.
Oh, okay.
But thank you. Hey, first Audible review. I was very happy.
Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to do that. It helps people find us. And yeah, always send in your thoughts too.
If anybody's reviewing us on things that I don't understand, because there are lots of podcast platforms, just let me know. Like send us an email or something if I'm not mentioning your name. All
right. So we keep promising to get into it. And I'm really excited to talk about this book.
Yeah.
Clara, what did you think?
This is what I had remembered all those times. So much time that I remembered of this book, and I kept thinking was the next Heroes of Olympus book that I was reading, but it wasn't. It was this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. And I love it so much. And it's so good. And my boy Nico. And I just, God, Percy and Annabeth.
Yeah. And no, it's going to be hard to know where to even begin with this one.
That's why the recaps are helpful.
But I really, really enjoyed it on this reread too. I think it is the best book. I think that it's debatable with Mark of Athena, but and whether I like it better than Mark of Athena, I'm still not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it has so much good stuff in it.
This to me felt the most emotionally similar actually to The Last Olympian in a lot of ways. It's missing that conclusion and punch to a lot of it.
Yep.
But nonetheless, it's so many things coming together.
Mm-hmm.
So many people growing in their strengths and their faith in themselves and each other. The world building going to another level, especially the incorporation of major mythology and major gods with the Titans and Tartarus. It was just I found myself after every POV chapter for most of the book coming up to you, Dan, and being oh my God, I love this. Oh my God, this just happened. Oh my, I can't believe it. And hearkening back to my younger internet days, I was squeeing all over the place in excitement, fangirling for these characters.
Yeah. This book especially, you could come up with a top 10 list of best moments in this book and it would be a difficult ranking.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You would easily come up with 10 and figuring out the order of them would not be easy. So
good thing that's not one of the things that we set off to do here.
Yeah, I mean,
that is an interesting idea, though.
Between the Nico stuff and the Tartarus stuff, and then within Tartarus, there's Bob being great. There's Ackless, which I really like. There's bringing back Kelly. We have so many callbacks in this between Kelly and Hyperion and Calypso. Obviously, that's another standout moment for sure. And also the fact Calypso also in Tartarus, that was awesome.
I know. Just Annabeth and Percy being the emotional heart of this through and through. Just could I possibly love two characters more? I don't think so.
No, not possible. It's not possible for you to.
I was saying, and I haven't read every series or whatever, but I was saying to Olga that I think Percy and Annabeth are the best pop culture, young adult, kid book couple. I can't think of one that's better.
I am inclined to agree with that. They're so functional without it seeming weird.
or boring.
You know?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
boring. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're really great. What else happened in this book? Hazel got all these awesome powers.
Keone and
Oh,
Piper.
yeah.
I mean,
The continuity in this is awesome.
The fact that Piper had only the 4 chapters
Yeah.
of her POV. That's it. She had the least POV chapters out of anyone else.
Mhm.
And that's what he did with them. That's what
They were
Rick
great,
managed to do. And it was like so standout. I mean, for me, my MVP in this book is Mr. Frank Chung.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Frank yet.
Oh my God. Like,
Oh my God.
yeah, if I'm saying how could I possibly love like a couple more, how could I possibly love an individual character who's not Percy more than Frank? Like, oh man.
Yeah, no, and he has such a good arc in this, and I think, like we talked about, it's like Leo has a really good
Yes.
coming out of it from last week,
Yes.
last podcast and
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, it definitely. I see that while I still, to be my negative Olga self, while I still feel a bit of the disconnect between Lost Hero and
Mark
Mark of Athena. Nonetheless, I think this gave Leo the continuity between Mark of Athena and House of Hades was the right continuity for Leo's character.
Yeah.
Like that made the most sense to me, and therefore I can't like in retrospect complain as much about now I understand the like having read everything else, and I mean not having finished this pentology, but still looking at it this way, I see the journey that he went through, and I like it a lot more.
Yeah.
I love the fact that Rick does that where he has someone be really awesome in one book and then like take a step back, like backwards in their growth and like then grow more again in that third. Like I think that's really nice and realistic too, both for people, but also especially I think for kids.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So I have a number of critiques. They're not like intense critiques, but I think that for one thing, I do think that there's too many narrators in this book. It's cool and nice that all 7 of them get stuff, but on the flip side, it makes it so that I feel like the A storyline is Tartarus, and then all the other people are like vignettes, which isn't necessarily terrible, but I don't feel like they feel as cohesive because it's also like a lot of a single person or 2 people going off and doing something. And so unlike, I feel like Mark of Athena felt much more like this is the team on a journey or whatever. Whereas it's like, okay, now we're going to have like literally Frank on it by himself on a brig. And, like we're going to have Leo off completely away from everybody else. And that isn't necessarily even, I don't even know if I'd say this is a critique. I just don't feel like it's as cohesive as some of the other ones because it feels like this is an awesome moment. Now let's go to a different awesome moment. And like you said, like the Piper thing is so awesome. And then we never hear from her again. Like
she has some good like lines in other people's chapters, but he just summarizes her emotional state very well there. But that is like definitely a vignette.
I'd say my biggest complaint is I think the 2 villains at the end are pretty lackluster in my opinion. They just don't do much for me. I think the biggest problem with them is that they just show up at the very end and then they try to jam in like some character and backstory and stuff. But it feels like if Lost Hero ended on them going to Medea's department store and it was like, okay, I'm Medea. Let me tell you everything about me and now defeat me.
Right. It was just like so action heavy that I kind of understand that because you made this critique to me. This is another book that has like too many climaxes that Mark of Athena arguably had too.
And Son of Neptune and Lost Hero.
Never mind every single book so far. But sometimes it's just fun to, after the emotional gut punch of Bob and Jameson like sacrificing themselves to get Percy and Annabeth out of Tartarus, then watching or reading about Hazel being a badass in that fight and like getting Leo out of through the labyrinth and through that like and with the mist and Hecate, like she's mysterious and interesting, but I don't really need as much page time, screen time, so to speak, out of her.
I think my problem is if they had literally just done either, I can't remember the friggin' names, Let me read that. Pacify and clitoris.
I keep wanting to say that too.
Clytius. Okay.
I keep wanting to say that too, which is why I keep tripping over it. I'm like, oh God.
My problem is if they had just picked either Pacify or Clytius, I think I would have been fine with that. It was just like, okay, let's deal with Pacify. And then the problem with Clytius too is they just fought Tartarus, and they're like a little too similar, except that one is like Tartarus.
Right.
And the other is this random giant. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, not the bigger problem, but in a lot of ways, it's like, again, he's primordial. He's before time. Like, they can't really defeat him. Yeah. And so this is another criticism we had. You built up to me separately for different reasons the idea of Nyx and like how terrifying she is, and I would argue important she is. And she
the god of night.
Yes, the god of night, goddess. And she's someone who I'd like heard about. She's in a lot of like young adult fiction in various forms. And so I was like, ooh, goth queen, time to like read about her. And because she's night, because
they can't actually fight her.
Exactly. And we've already had Annabeth like outwitting Arachne as like the climax of Mark of Athena, that the way that she outwits Nyx. And that scene, it was just like interesting, but it was played for more of a joke than Arachne, because Arachne at least has like a history with Athena and
it was still, and you were still scared for her with Arachne more than I felt like I was with Nyx. I just, if I was going to cut anything out of this book, it would be the entire them meeting Nyx and going through the castle and all that stuff. I would have gone straight from Aklis, who I think is awesome, to them meeting Bob up again and going to Hyperion.
Yeah. Or frankly, even some of the children of Nyx, like Eris and Giron or something.
The old
because at least, yes, they are also like undefeatable in their own ways, but nonetheless, they are not as big bad as like she's Night.
Yeah, could have saved Nyx for something else and made her more central.
I agree. Yeah. And then my other like critique, I guess I would say, is Hazel is like cool in this book. She doesn't actually really have an arc in this book. Like, so like I understand, like it is cool to see her learning her magic and how that ties into Pluto and all that stuff. And her and Piper learning from each other. That's like one of the best parts of the book for sure. But there's a lot of chapters given to Hazel, and I don't really know what her story is here.
The unfortunate thing with Hazel is like Rick got it perfect on the first try, in my opinion.
Yep.
Like her story was so good in Son of Neptune. It had such a solid beginning, middle, and end that, the only things that are left for her to really do is like be strong, learn better, and like recover further from her trauma, which is important and good. And also like they do also flesh out her relationship and thoughts on Pluto more in this book.
Yeah. I think I would have liked to see her interacting more with Nico. I think that's like I don't know. It would be nice to see her having like family moments.
Yeah.
Because she also has so much trauma around family. And the few interactions they do have, I find really sweet.
Yeah.
This could just be my bias towards Nico. But like, I feel like that would have been nice for her in her, again, like as her sort of like healing.
Yeah. I mean, what if they cut out all the Jason stuff and gave it to Hazel as far as Nico goes?
Boy, wouldn't that be nice if they just cut out all the Jason stuff? I remembered what my critique of this is. Jason.
There was a reason I remembered what I wanted to say as a major critique, and I was like, you know what? I'll leave this one for Clara.
Here it is, folks. It's Jason.
All right, elaborate.
That's it.
Other than Jason's existence.
Okay, well, I mean, but that's kind of it. Like, I just don't. You know, when often there's just like a girl who's like invented in a story, and she doesn't have any point except she's the romantic interest, and so the fact that the boy has her in this like super heteronormative like fable, like that means that he won. I feel like that's what Jason is for Piper in a way that just gets like really bizarre, where it's like because it makes like this relationship central to Piper's character in a way that I don't think she needs particularly. I mean, I think the relationship is nice and good and cute, but like does she need it?
I mean, that's very background in this book, at least.
Yeah.
But then what is Jason in this one? They're just like, well, Jason isn't as Roman as he used to be. It's like, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Well, so that's the thing.
Oh no, his hair is longer.
I think they try to give him an arc in this book, and in a very simplistic way, I think they succeed in that he has a problem. He doesn't know which side to pick. In his climax, he picks a side, and it has consequences because then when they fight the bad guys, he can't control the Legion, and then he gives it to Frank, and that's symbolic of him finally definitively making the choice. There is an arc there.
Right.
But one thing I was saying to Olga before we recorded is I think the problem is, in a weird way, Rome is so defined of what is Rome and what it stands for. They have not done that for Greece. So what is it about Camp Half-Blood in Greece that Jason is connecting with in a way that he isn't with Rome? And is it just Piper?
I don't know. Jason is always defined in his relationship to others, right? So it's his relationship to Rome, his relationship to Reyna, to Piper, to Frank, to whoever else.
Yeah.
And he actually just doesn't, to Nico. He has nothing. Yeah. Who is Jason? I just don't know.
And I think that's supposed to be the point, is he doesn't know either.
Yeah.
I think
I can't care if there's never any if we were forced in the way we were with Lost Hero, if we were forced to mostly be looking at the world through his eyes, then maybe by this point I'd be really pretty sympathetic.
Yeah.
But I'm just not. His POV chapters are all about other people.
Exactly.
It's not it's not exploring his relationship with his sister or his parents or any of his past. He might as well still have amnesia.
So Dan told me that in the 5th book, Nico's a point of view person. And I'm just like, well, good, about time, because half of Jason's chapters are us exploring Nico's state of mind here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, that's great, because we get Nico, and someone has to be that person. And Jason is such an empty shell who doesn't have other things going on that it doesn't feel like a loss of Piper moments if she was there, or even a loss of Hazel moments necessarily. Although that would arguably be interesting too. But that, Hazel filling in for Bianca and her
that's the thing, is they could have had, they do have cute moments. I would have loved a book where they slowly become actual siblings to each other.
Yes. Imagine that. Imagine you take Jason, you throw him out the window. Yeah. He can fly, he'll be fine. And then you just have Nico and Hazel and their sibling dynamic, and it would be great. And you could think about the underworld and all these cool things. God.
Yeah.
So this is my problem again, unfortunately, with actually Mark of Athena, where you guys, I understand the complaint maybe of this book having too many people, but if Mark of Athena had vignette chapters, even the same thing of 4 chapters, the way that Piper got in this book, if we got at least 4 chapters of every single person on the quest in Mark of Athena, I feel like that could have taken some of the heavy lifting off of House of Hades, and then maybe Jason could have had a little bit more of an arc, because it wouldn't have to be just all in this book and also covering for Nico in this book.
Well, the thing, I think that Jason being the POV for the Nico stuff is a problem because A, it's not good enough for Nico, and B, it's not good enough for Jason. Neither side is handled enough. Nico should be a POV character when this happens.
Yep.
And I understand that it's a reveal to the audience, so you can't really be in his head. But
but it could be his POV. That could be his first POV chapter, which would also just be oh, yay, finally a Nico POV chapter.
Because especially the fact that we finally get him in the 5th book, cool as the POV, but kind of weird to be oh, it's the last book of the series, let's give it to him and not one of the 7.
Yeah.
I think it would have helped did they set it up more here, but
Jason starts off as I was chafing against the rules of the Legion from the beginning, but it's what I was meant to be. It's what I was meant to do. And I finally got a chance to grow past that. Camp Half-Blood, more artsy, more free. It's blah, blah, blah. I can everyone I know there and from there is able to find themselves in a way that the Legion does not let you. I see it almost as like if Jason had stayed in Rome, if he hadn't let himself grow, could he have really been that good of an ally for Nico? It's almost one of those things of like, Jason saw more of the world. Jason saw like, you know, met other people he never could have met before. And he has grown, not necessary to accept, but like to embrace. Because before he wasn't like creeped out by Nico because of his like sexuality. He was just like, this guy is like isolated. I don't understand him.
I mean, everybody is basically like literally. There's like the same line from like 5 different people.
That's true. Like, oh my God. But the fact is that Jason, who is like supposed to be the stand-in for quote unquote all American you know, like hero, golden boy, and he's the one who's like trying to actively embrace Nico and like connect with him emotionally and bring him out of his shell, like and say like, you will be like, if we will meet you halfway, we will accept you, just like let us get to know you. That is something meaningful.
Yeah, I'm really interested to read the next book. Because I didn't read it. I officially did not read it. I had this one in my Kindle library, said read. So I know I read this one. I know I didn't. I had to just buy it. I had to buy Blood of Olympus.
Yep.
But like, I remember liking Jason a lot. And is it like an age thing? I just like, I aged out. Like I had my Jason phase and now I'm like, just very much beyond that.
I mean,
like,
I definitely don't dislike him as much as you seem to. And I mean, I have seen stuff beyond where you are. But at the same time, like, I think that what he has going on in this book is like sort of interesting. Like, I would give it like a solid 6.5 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah.
When did you feel, let me ask.
Yeah.
When did you feel something about Jason's journey? Like feel?
I mean, I didn't feel anything about Hazel's journey either in this book. I was like, that's cool. I don't know. Like, I feel, I don't know.
Yeah.
I did like him talking to the Southern Wind or whatever.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something.
Yeah, that's true.
There's something worthwhile in his allyship. It's not perfect. There's a whole lot of stuff we should talk about with the sexuality stuff in a bit. But like, I think there is a kernel of some good stuff with his allyship.
Yeah.
And I feel like I understand him, honestly. I understand the idea of he feels like he has been defined by everybody around. Like, all of our complaints are like his problem. Like, he has been defined by everybody around him and their expectations for him. And that he doesn't know who he is without the expectations, without just doing what he thinks people want from him. And that's his journey. That being said, it creates this weird sort of thing of like, hey, my struggle as a like white beautiful man is that I'm a white beautiful man. And like,
he's one of the most privileged demigods by nature of how much power he has, his status due to being who his father is, and yet it's not to negate the traumatic things that have happened to him, but nonetheless, it's
one of the big problems I have is that we're asked to constantly be reminded of how hard his privilege is for him, which is bizarre because there are things in his life that have been difficult for him.
Yeah.
Like, and there's no, like, how does he feel, especially now that he knows about, like, his mom and all these things? Like, we just sort of left that behind in California and went off.
Yeah.
Read the first 3 chapters of the next book.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, like, you are going to get things.
Pull it up now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In the middle of the podcast.
Like, I'm like, legitimately, they're going to address that like really soon.
I'm glad.
This is going to kind of like what I earlier said with Leo. I believe in this being greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think personally I'll get there, even though there are things in this book where I'm like individually nitpicking. I have far fewer complaints than I did, I think, with Mark of Athena, even though I think the highs of Mark of Athena with the Annabeth chapters were higher than in this book. There was still like so much more consistency.
I don't even know if I agree with you about the highs being better.
I know, because Frank was so good, but like,
it's
and
hard.
Frank was so good.
I will say about all this Jason stuff, I mean, I'm not going to say anything specific, but I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to have this discussion without being able to talk about certain things. Like, there's...
Well, don't. Don't.
I'm not going to. I'm not going to.
You promised me no spoilers in the press and ruin things.
I'm not going to. I'm just saying, my God, this is such a... People who know were like, yeah, sorry,
Screaming.
Dan.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, just know that I had once upon a time a great deal of sympathy for Jason, and maybe someday that'll come back, like tonight when I start this book.
Before we like fully move on from this kind of thing of like where were people's arcs, yes, we touch on like Hazel was more kind of action centric. Leo had more of like a maturity and romance subplot, I guess, but
awesomeness,
and a very good one, obviously, but. The one that seems kind of like the most comparable to Jason to me is actually kind of Percy and Annabeth. Like, not their relationship, but I felt like it was almost like going to be very internal as we start off on Tartarus. And I felt like it was building and building. And then it became a lot about Bob. And
we should shout out. Bob has a great arc.
Bob was so cool. Like,
yeah.
yes, and you know, not a POV person, but like so great. But my point is that they also start off being very like internal, and yet both within themselves and also with their relationship. But I don't necessarily feel like it like actually fully ended on that note. I guess like Percy learned a lesson about using people, or also again like letting other people do the heavy lifting for him and trusting, you know,
leaving people behind, taking people for granted. The whole idea is he's this rash person always forging ahead and not really necessarily looking back all the time. I think I kind of disagree with you and kind of agree with you. Like, I understand that, like, if you look at beginning and end, what are Percy and Annabeth like arcs in this book? I don't have like a very concrete thing to tell you. At the same time, like, I just think it was delving into who are they as humans, and because it's a series, it's not like a single book or a single movie. Like, I'm okay with that. I feel like from Percy and Annabeth in this book, you get literally every emotion.
Yes.
You get love, you get happy elation moments where finally things are working out. You get fear, you get jealousy, you get guilt. You know, you get like his dark side with the poison. Like, what else?
And for the record, I'm not trying to say this as like, there was not a single moment in Tartarus that I didn't enjoy in my own twisted way. Even when he was in dying pain, I enjoyed. It was a gripping, thrilling, heartbreaking. Like, I just was kind of surprised at where they ended up emotionally, and it was not a bad kind of surprise. It was just like this is not the payoff that I expected or that necessarily was set up, but I'm very fascinated by it. And I think it is, again, an example, like the guilt, like you said, the introspection is kind of an example of maturity that keeps older readers engaged, and might be the first time that younger readers could be like facing some of these themes even.
Yeah.
I am such a sucker for a good plot about the consequences of actions in children's plots. Yeah. Like, there's some like psychological reason that's very satisfying, I think, especially as an older reader. Yeah. To see a children's story where you're just sort of like killing the bad guys and it's very simple and nice and good. Yeah. And then to return years later in another book and say like, oh, you know what? You shouldn't just kill bad guys. Like, life isn't so simple. There's
kind of the Civil War thing. Event Captain America Civil War.
Oh, okay. I was gonna be like, what are you talking about?
I understand where that was confusing. Captain America Civil War.
Okay.
The Sokovia Accords. That's what I'm talking about.
Not the Union versus the Confederacy that we took a deep dive into last week.
Yeah.
Jeez.
The obvious Civil War, guys.
Yeah, or I'm thinking of the first of the new Star Wars movies, where like there's that first scene with Finn look like there's this like bloody stormtrooper helmet, and you're immediately asked sort of like, oh, it's not going to be like those. I love that sort of thing.
Definitely, and I think that in some ways, I mean, I talked about the vignettes outside of Tartarus. I just think it's a bunch of character vignettes for them, where it's like, this is, you know, at the beginning they're in the Cocytus and it's them dealing with their depression and and their fears and their, like,
Yeah.
is it worth going on with all the things we've dealt with? And then they have the later thing about like the people that they feel like murderers, the people that they have died for them or because of them in some guilt-ridden way. Like,
Are you talking about the Arias? Was that what they're?
No, I'm not talking about the Arise.
I'm
talking about when they went right at the end of the night, like when they get out of that out of Night's castle,
Night,
they have to like jump over the lake of death.
Right.
But the Arise are friggin' awesome.
Oh my God.
And Percy basically being like, yeah, I deserve this when he's dying of Gorgon's blood is like crazy. And Annabeth wandering around lost because of Calypso.
Oh, that broke
my
me.
God.
that broke me. I mean, you guys remember how much I was like the maturity of the Calypso thing in Battle of the Labyrinth and the themes of that. And it's like bringing that up in this way where like she doesn't just forgive him and curses and putting that on Annabeth. Oh my God.
Well, and I think that the Calypso stuff's interesting because I think it is a pretty nuanced thing because like in some ways I'm like, hey, like he did try, but also he didn't follow up.
No.
Like he knows the gods are not very good at stuff. And so
And so Leo being the key to that.
Yeah.
Leo being like, I mean, first of all, the fact that they just, I'm a big fan of the whole like enemies to lovers trope.
Yep.
Who can resist? Not I.
No
so
one.
that they like begrudgingly form a friendship and romance, and the fact that he's actually the one who's like, no, I'm going to come back for you. I swear it on the sticks. Like,
and that swearing on the sticks thing, that's such a great moment of like worlds. Like we understand what that means.
Yeah.
And now it's like really like paying off in like an important emotional character moment. And that's just been building for so long.
Yeah. So who could have expected that Calypso, after cursing Percy and it being there, that she wasn't just going to be a mention?
Yeah.
Like, I thought that would be it, and that would be like enough, and yet next level.
And I think they have some pretty, interesting talks with Bob that are pretty adult or nuanced or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think the one thing I'll say that's like kind of weird about the end of this book as far as Tartarus goes is that like it's kind of weird that at once his fatal flaw is he's too good a friend, but also this book is you're not a good friend. Like it's kind of
he didn't consider Bob a friend. It's like he forms the relationships with people he like cares about, but it's this argument of like he uses people to his own ends for the people that he actually cares about and how he prioritizes people.
I kind of wish Annabeth had to knock him out and drag him into the elevator.
I was actually thinking that too, Dan.
To me, that would be what like actually solidified this as an adult story and would have meant a lot more for Annabeth and for both of them. Right? Because like she has the thing in her head where she's like, this is what it means to be a daughter of Athena sometimes, is having to make the difficult choice of letting someone else fight the battle. And so her making that choice and also making it for Percy, which also would fit into her fatal flaw of control
hubris,
freak thing, and him not being able to do it. Because here's the problem is that now he's like overcome it a few too many times for my taste, considering last book was also kind of about that. So like,
well, yeah. I mean, this does go back to like the very first thing I said about his fatal flaw was I was like, interesting if it's his fatal flaw, since like the whole like the lightning thief is him not doing that. Like, he's a very good hero. He keeps on overcoming his fatal flaw, but I think maybe that is why he's the best hero, dare I say, but because he realizes it's his fatal flaw. He's confronted. He knows that this is the most difficult thing, and yet he does what is necessary. Like that's heroic. That's
And I think the other thing you're supposed to take away at the end of this book that he's like, that he does feel like he messed up, and that this is in some ways is going to reaffirm his fatal flaw because he's like, I can't do that again. So
interesting.
I don't know. It's interesting. There's so much to talk about, but I want to talk about Nico before we get into the rankings. You got spoiled, Olga, right?
I was stupid.
And don't say exactly how, because I think you would end up spoiling Clara too. So
I have a feeling we might have the same amount of spoiled knowledge, but I don't want to assume. So we'll just find out in a few months or something.
I'll just say I got spoiled by graphic design
in the back of one of the books.
I got spoiled by fan art.
Okay, so that's different.
Who knows?
But understand and yet similar. Yeah.
And I can't remember if I knew before I read. Like, I mean, so obviously, like I read this the first time, like right around when it came out. I can't remember if I had gotten spoiled about it or not, but I definitely I want to at least say that like it was, not to say that it isn't impactful now for people, but like especially 7 years ago or whatever, it was like pre the end of the Legend of Korra and stuff like that. Like
it was 2012, right?
Yeah,
Around then.
Yeah. It was definitely impactful to me that he was doing this in a kid's book in a way that like is slowly becoming a little bit more normalized now, but still is very unique.
Yeah.
And still fresh, I guess.
You know what I just like can't stop thinking about? So we were looking at international covers of Percy Jackson. One of the covers was from Russia. And I'm just like, how was this in the Russian translation? Like, if right now in modern day, 2021, Russia is one of the most hate-filled places when it comes to LGBTQ people. I'm speaking honestly more about the government policies than I would dare to say about the individual, but I can't give a lot of detail, specifics about that because I don't live there. But the point is that like how, things get edited. I hear so much about how like Cartoon Network shows like Steven Universe get edited for like China and Russia and many countries where they're not LGBTQ friendly and like the canonical romance couples are not there.
Friends. Or
they're
whatever.
friends, or they just change genders of people to make it heteronormative. I'm like, how do you write in those countries?
Can you read Russian?
No. I mean, I wonder if I could.
I wonder if you
Percy
could read that one chapter.
Oh, I could. Yeah. It would take me like 3 times as long as it does in English.
Yeah, but I mean, so one thing. So what I want to say, as I sort of praise it, I also want to say this is a very contentious thing in that he is sort of forcibly outed.
Yeah.
And that might be traumatic for some readers. Other readers, freaking love Nico. As far as like. There's not like one reaction from the LGBT community to how this is handled.
Right.
But I understand where there is some criticism of like, he's not coming to someone himself. He's being physically forcibly beaten down. And on one hand, I'm like, I understand the problem there. On the other hand, I'm like, to me, it's like a pretty cool metaphor come alive as far as how he feels physically manifesting. But I don't know. What do you think, Clara?
Yeah, so I adore Nico, if you didn't know. And I love so much about this scene. I found Cupid to be, I think, one of the most interesting, like, do you call Cupid a villain? No, I guess just God, right? Like,
yeah.
So cool and like terrifying in a way that I think they were trying to make Aphrodite and Mark of Athena, and it was sort of just like, stop talking about the Confederacy. And then, like this time you get Cupid and you're like, oh yeah, love is really scary and is closely related to death and all this. Like it's really high stakes. And Nico, just like, God, I love him so much. I think it would have been even more powerful for me, as we've said, like if this were a Nico POV, if he could experience these things himself. I don't think it was necessary to have Jason here experiencing it for us. And then Nico could have had ownership over that experience, but it still would have pushed him in a way of like thinking about things, right? But in a less, in more of the stakes that we have often throughout these books, where an interaction with a god makes you think about yourself. But it could be for him.
I mean, the thing to me, like I'm very torn on the Cupid thing, because I 100% understand how this could be triggering for someone, right? It's not just that like he's outed, it's that like things are so bad for him, like you said, like it's very evocative and powerful how much he's struggling. And so in one way, I think that could be really relatable to certain people and also very informative. And in that way, I feel like I am getting in Nico's head. Like I understand how much turmoil he's going through by the physical imagery that they're showing me here.
Right.
So that could be good, that could be bad. I guess on a storytelling level, I think the metaphor of love physically hurting you is really powerful and forcing you can't hold it in anymore. You finally just have to admit to yourself what you're feeling. I think that's awesome, but at the same time,
Well, and it's admitting to yourself.
That's exactly what I was going to say, where like in my ideal scenario, somehow Cupid has two personalities or something like that, or his his personas split up and Jason faces one and we get maybe some more interesting Jason in his head things of like what love means to him. And then in another, we have Nico and him like reconciling his identity. I mean, he's this angsty goth kid from the 1930s who doesn't feel connected to anyone, who's lost so much, who's in a tragic romance. Like he will never get what he wants.
Yeah, we haven't talked anything about the specifics of him having a crush on Percy.
The fact that it's Percy who betrayed him by letting his sister die at first, and yet he the heart wants what the heart wants. Like that is tragic in and of itself. And I could see how again that's like traumatic. It could be traumatic as well for readers of like, oh, he has to be in love with someone who will never love him back. Yeah, like that's juicy. It's fun in a sad way to read about because we love tragedies. Like that's a thing for storytelling. Yeah, but
it's also like it's the beginning of the story. It's not the end. You know, like
I agree with that. But the fact is that when you combine the like tragic nature of who he's in love with and how he'll never actually be able to get that, combined with a forced out, like an outing, him being outed in a way he didn't want. And maybe it'll be better. Like the idea is it'll get better for him. Yeah. But nonetheless, this is not like what I was trying to say was if Nico admitted this only to Cupid and ended the battle and the fight, and then he and Jason like reunited and we were in Nico's head for that. And then like Jason says something and Nico's riding the emotional high of that, and he like comes out to Jason expecting Jason to reject him. I just don't think he would
ever do that. I just don't believe that for a second that he would ever do that. I mean, here's the thing. I think this is a very nuanced, difficult thing to talk about. Right. Because on the one hand, we're also looking at it from our current lenses and also our current ages. Yeah. And I think to me, like it was like a big deal to me when Legend of Korra ended and Korra was revealed to be bi, and that things before that were just very different.
And even that was like arguably vague.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. That's the thing. It was very vague, but I was still shocked that they did it at all, and I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. Things are changing, and this was before that. So like to me, I was like, wow, I can't believe he's doing that. I can't believe he's doing that with this character, this freaking badass that you already love, that's already deep. So I think that there's a lot of good there. And I think that he also wanted to put you in Jason's perspective to also be writing to, straight kids who haven't had a lot of engagement with this about how do we be accepting, how to be loving and open and reach a hand out to someone who's struggling. At the same time, I understand what you're saying. Obviously, it'd be great to be in Nico's head more. It's not a black and white issue to me, I guess.
It's simultaneously trying to be representation, but also be a like outline for good allyship. And also, if you are a queer kid who now is like happy that you have Nico as a character representing you, a character you probably already adored, and you're like, oh, the most like popular kid could the guy who has everything and
Jason,
Jason, like someone like him who I think wouldn't accept me. If he does, that could feel nice. Like that could be nice to read about.
Yeah. I think we should try to move on unless Clara has anything else he wants to throw in.
No.
Okay. It's a complicated thing, and I would love people to write in specifically about this topic and how they feel about it.
Especially if maybe you are a younger listener, because we haven't been teens in a while.
Yeah.
Shh. Don't say that.
We're still youth.
We're so young.
Yes. All right, guys. So we're actually going to end out here before we get into the rankings, a big cliffhanger. Because we went on so long about this. I don't actually think we're going to do a recap for House of Hades because I think we get into the thick of things quite a bit here. If you're not a fan of that, let us know. We'll make sure to do recaps in the future. We're not probably going to change our mind about this. Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Part 2 will be the rankings, which is somewhat extended more than usual. And we'll see you next time. Bye. You guys can say bye too.
Bye.
Bye.